Hey, welcome to Dan's Model Works, and we are on part 2 of building our Mi-4 Hound by HobbyBoss in 1/72 scale. And this is as far as we've gotten. Obviously the fuselage halves are not glued together, but the cockpit has been assembled and painted. Let's just put the camera here on we'll call it a tripod. It's not really. So one of the questions I had on the last episode is if we look at our cockpit, you can see that the instrument panel there just seems to be kind of floating. So let's just set our transparency in place and see if it'll cover all sins. And as you can see, by the time we paint the areas that are not going to be left clear, I don't think you're really going to be able to see the back of that instrument panel. So that answers that question. Time to get on with assembling the rest of the interior. Now this, of course, is the interior ceiling panel of the cabin, and it had quite a few sink marks in it. And I thought I'd try doing something a little different. Instead of trying to completely eliminate them, I thought, what would happen if I were to put some of the Tamiya really thick model cement in each of those segments where there was a sink mark. And maybe we could soften things up just enough that it wouldn't be obvious that there was sink marks there. You know, oftentimes the material on the inside of a helicopter has some soundproofing and deadening in it. And I just figured, let's see what it looks like and see if we can just leave it like that. So, and we can't really tell now because, of course, the glue is transparent. But let's just give it a coat of gray paint and see if we've camouflaged that and see if we've made it much less recognizable as ejector pin marks. So after a coat of neutral gray, you can still see a little bit of dents where the ejector pin marks were. But if we put it at an angle like that, which is what we're going to be looking at it when it's inside the helicopter, or actually like that, I think the result that we achieve is worth the shortcut, rather than trying to put any sort of filler in there and then sand it down and everything like that. Just to put a little bit of Tamiya glue in there and let it kind of smooth things out itself. I think one of the neatest parts of this kit are these clamshell rear doors, because in addition to this box, which is a separate part, there's also a bunch of framing that goes in I haven't glued in yet. Unfortunately, the whole effect threatens to be ruined by this large ejector pin mark here and the other one there. And I don't see how I could possibly put some filler in there and sand it out. So I'm going to try the thick Tamiya glue again and see if I can at least minimize it enough so that it doesn't ruin these clamshells, because I'm going to have these open just since they're so nice looking. Here's the right-hand side clamshell with all that bracing in place. And as I mentioned, it certainly looks good. Now let's paint it up and see how it looks. More mocking up and test fitting going on here. I haven't glued any of this together, but you can see how well this fits in, and I've already put the other fuselage half on and knows that everything is going to go together well. But my only concern is this gap right here. That's where the machine gunner's gondola goes on. And as we can see, there's a door going through. So my supposition, because I don't have any pictures of this area of the inside of a Hound, is that there must be a compartment between the main cargo compartment and the engine. The engine, of course, occupies this space right here, and it sits at an angle. but HobbyBoss does not give you a bulkhead or anything. So if I put these halves together, you'll see what the problem is going to be. So I've got the fuselage halves together, and I'm just trying to give you guys a good view here. Let's see. Well, it's not a huge problem, but you can look up through that door, basically right up into the engine compartment. And given that they've got these open louvers right here, you can see that there is a see-through effect there. So what I'm going to do is, let's pop this apart. And of course, the wrong half decided to stay with the helicopter. There we go. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a bulkhead right here, just so that when you're looking up, you can't see up into the area where the engine should be. Once again, it's another one of these things probably nobody will ever notice, but I'll feel better having put it in there. So there's the bulkhead I installed. And it still gives enough space for the hypothetical engine to go in here. And really, it's more of a backing plate than anything else. The reason I glued it where I did is because I already had these lugs up here that it was convenient to glue them to. Because all I want is so that when you look in through the ramp, that you're not looking at the light coming in through the grill work here, whatever, just so that it's obvious that's not one giant compartment going all the way up into the nose. But at any rate, I think I'm going to paint that whole area up there a black or dark gray or something like that. Now in this shot, we can see our roof panel and our two doors, and I've given them a wash of German gray, and I did something a little different. Instead of using paint thinner, I used windshield washer fluid, which some other people have recommended, and it seemed to work all right, so I might do it in the future. As well, I gave a wash to the inside of the fuselage sides, and I don't think I'm going to do a whole lot more to them. Now, one thing that is missing is any sort of fold-up seat detail, and I have no idea what the fold-up seats would look like in a Hound. There probably was a couple different variations, but not knowing anything at all, I think I'm just going to leave it plain. So, of course, before I glue the fuselage halves together, I'm going to have to insert these windows. But we're getting close to putting, the main assemblies together. And here, this very broad black bulkhead here, that's the piece that I installed to add as a blanking plate so that you can't look up into the nose of the helicopter where there should be an engine. So that's been glued and painted in. We're getting close to gluing the fuselage halves together, and normally I would like to use white glue for holding my windows and things in place. However, these transparencies go on from the inside, and I will be having to mask them. So the last thing you want is to put a piece of masking tape or put some mask-all on a transparency and then have it pop inside, and then you're never able to put it back in again. So in this case, I had to be very careful and use plastic model cement, and hopefully none of these are going to be falling inside the fuselage after we get it together. Also of note, before I glue all this together, is the roof of the cockpit, and that's how it looks all painted up. Whether or not anyone will ever be able to see it, I don't know, but there it is. And it's dropped and glued. As I said before, the fit is really, really nice. If you look up here, you can see it fits almost perfectly on this side of the fuselage. We'll see when we put the other side in how well it goes against that. But over here as well, by my thumb, you can see how well that comes up against the side of the fuselage there. So let's get the other side on. And they are together. A little bit of sanding to do up here on the roof. Focus in on that. Nothing too serious. The bottom looks really, really good. And I'd like to call attention once again here to the roof of the cabin. Like, that is firmly in contact with either side. And yet, at no time was I forcing these to come together. So I don't want to sound like I'm gushing too much over this kit, but they really did do a nice job of engineering the fit of the various components and things. I don't think I'm going to have to put any filler on the outside of this fuselage at all. Just a little bit of rubbing down. That should do it. I do want to make note of, if we look on the instructions, they would have us assembling the gondola, not necessarily putting it on, but assembling it. But they would probably have you assemble it before painting. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave the gondola off, mainly because it has a transparency that has to go on it and a machine gun and everything like that. I think it'd be easier just simply to airbrush that part the same color as the underside and then assemble it and glue it on. So that's what I'm going to do there. I think we'll put the nose on next. And here's the nose cap on. Now, you might be able to accuse Mill of broadly copying the Sikorsky design, but really the noses, other than general outline, don't match at all. I mean, number one, we've got these very large air intakes, as well as these intakes here, I believe, which are probably for the supercharger. So there is a fair amount of difference between them once you get past the overall shape. Now, in preparation for painting, I'm putting everything on that I want to have painted at the same time. So this door has been glued on. Don't think there's any point in having this door open when we're going to be having the main clamshells open. And I've got the tail planes here, the stabilizers on. And pretty much the only other thing I can think of that needs to be glued on before I get ready to paint is basically the doors and the windshield here. And there's our cockpit transparencies glued in. And this door is glued in place in the closed position. The door on this side, even though I'm going to be tacking it closed for painting, after painting I'm going to be posing it in the slid open position, and then that way we'll be able to look inside the cockpit, which I think turned out pretty good. And then that'll give things a little bit more animation. So I think that is about everything I can do prior to painting. So this looks like a good place to break things off for this week. And I'd like to say thanks for watching, and until next time, keep on modeling.